So after uploading my last video, I got some comments that were asking about Tier 21, and I suddenly came to the realization that I did not actually ever make a video on Tier 21, even though I meant to. I planned to do it like weeks ago and just never ended up actually doing it, and I thought I did. So this whole time I was like believing that I already had the video out, and then suddenly people were asking about it. I went back and checked and realized that I had not made the video. So here's the long overdue Tier 21 Elemental Shaman video. In this video, I'm planning to basically just go over what the set is, what I think it's useful for, how it might change our talent looks, our talent setups and stuff, and most importantly, how good it is in its current setup, and if I think it's going to be changed. So without further ado, let's get started. So first off, let's actually look at what the set does. The 2-set Lava Burst increases the damage of your next Earth Shock or Earthquake or Frost Shock by 20%. They still have not fixed the grammar on that, really bugging me, but 2-set, pretty good. It used to be a 10% buff that stacked 3 times, but since it got consumed on use, sometimes you only got 1 stack, sometimes you got 3. I think this iteration is better than the original one, and I think that it's a lot more useful, especially for things like Ice Fury and Gambling build where you're doing multiple shocks in a row. Now the 4-set Earth Shock and Frost Shock have a 15% chance to cause an elemental overload. This used to be 30%. And what it means by this is basically it's kind of what you'd expect. We were a little bit confused at first because it wasn't very specific. But basically it's literally just a 15% chance to overload for the amount of damage that overload does. I believe it's 95% if you have the trait for it, which everyone should have at this point. So there's nothing special to it. It doesn't get affected by mastery at all. It's just flat 15% chance to do an additional 95% damage. The one thing to note about this is that last I checked, it wasn't able to crit, the overload was not able to crit, but if the main spell crit, the overload would do 95% of the critical damage even without actually critting itself. So that's kind of interesting since regular overloads do not do that. Regular overloads they just go off the spell power coefficient and then they have their own chance to crit. So that's kind of interesting that this works differently than that. I do not know for sure if it still works differently than that. Last time I checked it did, but that was about a week ago, so at this point it might not be the case anymore. But just a weird thing to note because that actually does make it slightly more powerful than an actual overload. So that's a little interesting, I guess. A little thing to keep in mind. So one thing that I do really like about this set bonus is that it has potential to be very interactive with your rotation, as opposed to like Tier 19 or Tier 20 where you pretty much just put it on and then did your thing. You might change talents for it, but otherwise you pretty much did the same thing as you'd always do. No rotational changes. This one has potential to be vastly different rotation when it comes to, well, I guess not vastly different, but it might put a lot more emphasis on maximizing things. Like, for example, in Tier 19 with Ice Fury, you would try your best to keep up your elemental focus for every single Frost Shock. It wasn't horribly important, but it was beneficial to do so. Now, you have not only that, but you also have the 20% damage increase before or after, or not before, but after a Lava Burst. So it's really, really hard to get get a Lava Burst in before all 4 of the Frost Shocks every time. Don't expect to ever get that, but 2 or 3 and you're doing pretty good. It's a very, very interactive playstyle, and there's a lot you can do with it, especially if you're playing Aftershock. And then there's also like the potential for, like, let's say you're playing with boots, you get a proc, you're capped on Maelstrom, but your Lava Burst is off cooldown. You use that, and then you Earth Shock. That could be a thing. We don't know yet. We're still working on trying to properly implement that into the APL to see if it's ever actually an increase. So far, it's been pretty much a wash, but we'll get more info on that as it gets closer to live. Right now, we're still pretty far out. Probably at least a month out of Argus coming out. Or rather, the raid coming out. Argus is already out. But that's something that I find really interesting with this set, is that there are quite a few things that could potentially be beneficial. Also, Earthquake. Just from my testing, it felt like there was definitely potential for like Lava Burst weaving into your AoE rotation to try to get the 20% damage buff on Earthquake. I wouldn't necessarily say you want it for every single Earthquake, but like, let's say there's 5 targets, you put Flame Shock on one, and you use instant cast Lava Burst. You may not necessarily cast it, but throw an instant cast in and drop an Earthquake after that. This probably won't really be a thing on stack targets, but if they're like moving around, like on the third boss in the instance, the High Antor and High Command, I believe it's called, there's definitely potential to be doing this to kind of min-max the earthquake damage that you get, especially when they aren't in range of chain lightning for a little bit. As they come back in, they could have the bigger earthquake or whatever. But that's definitely an interesting thing. But the 4 set, it still just feels really, really underwhelming. From my testing, it's not even like 5% of my damage most of the time. If that's like very, very lucky. If it was 5%, I had a really good pull, even with Gambling Builder Ice Fury. And on that topic, let's actually talk about how good it is. So, as you may have guessed by what I just said, it's not particularly good right now. All the sims I have run basically have it being like mediocre. Comparing it to tier 20 at equal eye level, exactly the same eye level, and fairly ideal stats, being my own character, it looked like tier 20 was better in pretty much every single situation. I guess except for maybe situations where there's too many targets to multi-dot. I don't really know if this would benefit at all from that either, though. But basically, even on pure single target, where tier 20 theoretically should not be that amazing on it, it should be better on multi-dotting, it was still a decent lead, like a 2% lead over tier 21 for my own character. One thing to note is that I did manage to get tier 21 to sim higher than tier 20 with one specific build, that build being Totem Mastery, Aftershock, Elemental Blast, Echo, and Ice Fury. That was the only build I ever got it to actually sim higher for. Now, this is not to say that this build's going to be the go-to or anything, because it's still obviously in testing, and it was very, very close to the other builds, while requiring a lot more min-maxing, so I definitely wouldn't say that, like, I'm not trying to imply that we should be playing this build at all. I'm just saying that out of all the sims I got, this was the only build that actually simmed higher in tier 21 than in tier 20. Now keep in mind we do still have, like I said, probably about 4 weeks before Antorus comes out at the raid, so chances are this will be changed. And by changed, pretty much the biggest changes I see them doing to this is going to be flat numbers buffs for either the 2 set or the 4 set. I do not see them at this point redesigning it, and that's kind of fine. Even though another big downside that I really don't like this for is that it does have a massive variance. Like, it increases the variance that is already pretty huge to be even huger, but at this point, is it really that big of a deal? Because we already have such a big variance, we probably won't even notice the difference. But I do see them changing this in the next 4 weeks, because it's very, very unlike Blizzard to let us have our very last tier set of the expansion be worse than any other tier set in the expansion. Like, think about HFC, where you had the Earthshock refunding. That was a really good tier set. Chances are they will make this one the best tier set we've had the entire expansion, even if it's only marginally better. And even if tier 19 is still better for AoE or whatever, this will probably be the one you will go to for raids every time. Mostly because of the eye level bonus, but it should always be better. I don't expect them to let it go live like this as soon as some evidence is presented that it is not better, assuming that we don't find out that the sim's wrong or something. I imagine they will change it, so I wouldn't get too worried about it yet. And just something I wanted to mention was that, also, due to the response on my last video, I will be uploading my Antorus raid testing on the PTR that I did, the full normal clear, or at least 10 of 11 normal clear. I will be uploading that on a boss per boss basis, probably on the schedule of 2 per day, starting either the day of this video release or the day after. We'll see how much I get done, but I do plan to do that on a one video per boss schedule, even if that includes some wipes or some interesting trash or something like that. I do want to do 1 video per boss, just because that seemed like that was the most popular, and it seemed like that was the easiest way to do it, because I kind of thought about it more, and it's like a 20-minute video that has like 2 bosses in it. This seemed kind of weird. Or like breaking it up by minutes kind of seemed weird. Doing like 3 bosses at a time was kind of weird. It was like every other option was just kind of like, it had more flaws than having 10 videos. It's only 10 videos, so I mean, as long as I break it up at least a little bit, I don't really mind doing it. But yeah, just wanted to give you guys a warning on that. And in all of those kills, I was using at least tier 22 set, or tier 21 2 set rather. And for the majority of them, I was using the tier 21 4 set just for kind of realism and to see how it performed. I think there were 1 or 2 bosses that I used the 2 set along with the tier 19 4 set, but that was it. Everything else I used all tier 21, and I used a variety of different builds, so you can look forward to that. But sorry this took so long to get out. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.